Big L, definitely up there for one of the big what ifs in rap history. A man who was supremely talented and just on the brink of really going to that next level, but then he suddenly passed away in early 1999. Sometime back, I asked my supporters on my channel what are some of the biggest what ifs in rap history, and I was met with things like, what if Tupac or Biggie didn't die, and things of that nature. But to me, that's far too common and is a great thought. The one what if that did stick out to me was, what if Big L didn't die in 1999? It stood out to me at first because I've always wanted to do some sort of video on Big L, but then I started to find out some of the things that could have happened if he was still alive today, and how this could have impacted quite a few people and events as we know. I made a post on the community tab of my channel asking for help with some of your theories on like what could have happened if he didn't die, and some of the information that has been presented to me will appear in the video, and I swear I have one of the best fan bases out there. I love you guys to death, and I mean that. But before I get more into the video, I would first like to thank you guys for coming to see this, because you guys can be doing a million other things right now, but instead you're here with me, and I appreciate that. If you guys like the content, you guys should like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Also, follow my Instagram too. That would be greatly appreciated. Comment down below your favorite Big L song, verse, lyric, etc. And also comment down below your theory on what would have happened if Big L didn't pass away. Maybe comment down below some future video ideas for this series. Also, let me know where you are tuning in from. Represent where you're from. Alright, without further ado, let's get into the video. Before we get into what could have happened to Big L if he didn't die in 1999, we must give a backstory on his career. Big L was born in May of 1974 in New York. He grew up on 136th Street in Lenox Avenue, which was referred to as the Danger Zone, and it's pretty self-explanatory why that is. Rap had been in Big L's life at an early age. With him and his brothers, they would perform in a park in the Danger Zone at parties. The DJ who let them use the equipment knew their mother, and the DJ was a part of the Phase 2 crew, which consisted of DJ Mr. Shades and two rappers who were Ace LaRock and LEL. When Big L and his brothers performed, they were the Little Phase 2 crew, and Big L's brother Donald was Little Mr. Shades, Big L was Little LEL, and his brother Lee was Little Ace LaRock. Donald was the DJ, Big L was the rapper, and Lee was just there because he was in the streets real hard. So he wasn't really into rapping at the time. But the moment Big L's brother Donald, who I might add is 6 years older than Big L, realized that Big L would be a rapper was when Donald snuck him into a Run DMC show, and Run DMC came out and rocked the house, and Donald turned around and Big L's mouth was wide open as he said nothing. After this is when Big L would really start to do his thing, and I suspect this concert may have taken place 1985 or 1984ish, because Run DMC released Kings of Rock in 1985. Donald said that Big L was 7 or 9 at the time when he was explaining the story, but I would say he would be closer or above the age of 9 when this happened. When Big L was asked how he got into rap, he would say this: "For as long as I can remember, I was always a rap fan. Back in the days, I used to listen to the Cold Crush 4 and Run DMC tapes, but I really got serious after Big Daddy Kane came out. I was a real big fan of his. I started writing rhymes in 1990. It was in a group called 3 the Hard Way, but they wasn't serious, so I went solo. Then I started winning rap contests and battling everybody in my hood and roasting them. Later on, I met Lord Finesse in a record store and we exchanged numbers. He let me open up his shows and produced a couple of demos for me. We took 4 good tracks to Columbia and they loved them. We started negotiating a deal and they signed me. This relationship with Lord Finesse would be very beneficial for Big L. Here's what Lord Finesse had to say about Big L. I discovered L back in 1991, but he didn't get on until a couple of years later, and what he had to go through to get on, how many different A&R offices we went into, and how many different meetings we took, and with the demos and everything, he went through it to get on, man. I had him in countless rap battles, anything he could do to get attention. My Yes You Baby remix in 1992. Something else to quickly mention is that a very notable thing Big L was a part of was a rap group called Children of the Corn, which consisted of Camron or Killer Cam, Mace or Murder Mace, Bloodshed, Big L, and Herb McGruff. More on this group a little later, but 1993 would be the year that Big L was signed with Columbia Records. Big L actually signed his contract the same day as Nas, which is something I actually didn't know previous to this video. It's interesting to see how when Big L was living, how their careers panned out. Lord Finesse has spoken about how Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous was recorded between 1991 and 1993, before Nas's Illmatic. Then Nas started to get a buzz after his song Halftime and MC Search's Back to the Grill, with that dropping in 1992. So then Columbia started pushing Nas over Big L. Can't forget to mention that Nas ended up having production from people like Pete Rock, DJ Premier, Q-Tip, and Large Professor, so that may have added to it. And then in the months after Big L's debut album was released, the Fugees came with their single Fuji La, and around when the Fugees started making noise, Big L unfortunately got lost in the mix. But going back a bit, and Big L would drop the lead single Put It On in 1994 for his debut album. Columbia Records wanted something with a hook that would be catchy and something they could get radio play with. They needed something bright and something friendly, so Put It On was the perfect record for them to go with as a single. The next year, Big L would release his debut album, Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous, in March of 1995. Here's what Big L had to say about the album. The album sold pretty good. It did well, extremely well, when you take into account that it didn't get much airplay or video play, but people still went out and supported it. If you took the promotion and video play away from some other artists, they couldn't sell what I sold. It sold just by word of mouth. People were like, Big L is hot. We like him. Not because the label put me out there or supported me. Big L felt like they didn't promote him in the way that he needed to be promoted. He's a lyricist, and they were trying to point him in a different direction to where he wanted to go. There was also people Big L was originally working with at Columbia when he first got on that left, and he would be stuck with, in his words, a bunch of strangers that didn't really know his music, and he didn't really get along with the new people, so he ended up leaving Columbia Records. According to Showbiz, who was a part of the Digging in the Crates crew, he said that after the whole thing with Columbia, Big L didn't even want to rap anymore. He said that Big L didn't feel it anymore and felt like he had lost the fire. But ultimately, we know that this wasn't the end of Big L making music. By the way, the Digging in the Crates crew was a crew Big L was a part of that had people like Fat Joe, Lord Finesse, OC, etc. 1999 would be the year that Big L would start Flamboyant Records, and he had big plans for it. He wanted to start things like Flamboyant Entertainment and Flamboyant Wear too, so he was definitely thinking big. This was also the year he released his popular song Ebonics, which actually got him an honorary hip-hop quotable from The Source magazine for his first verse. At the beginning of 1999, Big L ultimately passed away, and I'm not going to go too deep in the details of his murder, but like was just a light backstory on Big L because there's a lot more intricacies in the story, and I just wanted to give you, like the viewer, a backstory to like kind of like the main point of this video. You know, so I don't want people, oh, you forgot this, blah, blah, blah. Like, bro, just a brief backstory on the man Big L. Now, with the second part of the video, I will be discussing the hypothetical situation of what would happen if Big L didn't die and how this would have affected rap history. I asked you guys what would have happened, and you guys gave me a lot of good theories. In this next part, if I say something, I will justify why I think that or why someone else might think that. There's no 100% like way that we know exactly what would have happened, but we can piece some things together, and especially from people who were close to Big L because they know best in this particular situation. Now on my community posts, some people didn't believe me when I said this, but before his death, Big L was actually in talks with Dame Dash and Jay-Z to potentially sign with Roc-A-Fella Records in 1999. I do understand that Big L was doing his own thing with Flamboyant Records, and if he did do a deal, you know, people think that he would have did like a distribution deal. I got comments about that, and I understand that. Like, that could have definitely been a possibility. Here's what Big L's brother Donald, his own brother, had to say about the situation. Jay and Dame came to get L every weekend. I grew up with Dame and the older heads. Right before he got killed, L was with Jay-Z every single weekend. He was going to sign with them. Dame would get Jay and come scoop L personally. Lamont didn't want to just sign himself. He wanted Herb McGruff and one other dude to sign with him, but Jay just wanted him at the time. See, L was trying to get his mans in with him. He didn't want to come back for them, but I was telling him to sign with Jay and get your own label poppin'. He was just such a loyal dude. They were in talks, but they couldn't agree on L bringing his boys with him. He refused to leave his people behind. I think they would have worked something out, but L's life got cut short. So these are words from Big L's own brother, that he was in talks with Rocafella, and his own brother thinks that eventually, like, they would have definitely worked things out, you know, definitely worked something out. Now some people might be thinking, Jay-Z, why Jay-Z? Well, actually, Big L had a history with Jay-Z. Jay was on Big L's debut album. They battled each other back in the day. Big L filmed the rap battle between DMX and Jay-Z, and Big L did freestyles with Jay-Z. There's more, but as you can hear from Donald, Jay really wanted Big L, and so did Dame. Rich King, who is the Flamboyant Entertainment co-founder, said that Dame really wanted someone from Harlem, but Rocafella didn't have a lot of money at the time because they were going through their problems with Def Jam at the time. He said there was lights hanging out of the ceiling when Rocafella had no money. Beanie was on the shelf, Memphis Bleak was on the shelf, and nothing was coming out but Jay-Z stuff because this was pre-Hard Knock Life. This definitely kind of makes sense because besides Christian, who dropped an album on Rocafella in 1997, another artist besides Jay-Z didn't drop an album until 1999 when Memphis Bleak dropped his debut album Coming of Age, and this was of course after Hard Knock Life. Rich King said that they were trying to sign Big L for free and Big L wasn't having it because they just put out Ebonics and sold around 30,000 12 inches, but Dame was trying to sign them for 12,000 free promo records. They were looking for a commitment, but Dame threw a fit and tried to get Rich out of there. Dame thinks that Rich was trying to rob Big L and didn't want to sign Big L, an artist who he felt was getting robbed. Here is the words of Dame Dash. He was probably trying to rob him, and I was like, I'm not signing him to you, because that was the point of the deal. I'm not going to sign an artist that's getting robbed. So he needed to explain to me what his position was. Did he have a production deal with him? He's probably going to try to take half of his stuff, and I wasn't with it. So like, why would I have to go through him to deal with Big L? According to Rich, Dame asked how long the deal was to Big L, and he was talking about Big L's deal with Rich, and Big L responded with forever, and Rich said that L had his back while Dame was wilding out and Jay-Z was cool. But then Dame suggested that how about they do a Wolfpack group record that was Big L, C-Town, and Herb McGruff. Of course, like I said earlier, this deal never materialized due to Big L's death, but his own brother thinks that, like I said, they would have worked things out. Let's start with the scenario of Big L hypothetically working out this deal in 1999, which meant that this would have been after Jay-Z's Hard Knock Life album, and maybe after or around the time the Hard Knock Life tour took place, because L died a couple of weeks before the tour, and that tour went on to be a success, grossing over $18 million. So at this point, Rocafella would start having some money. But if Big L signed in 1999, and let's say it was after or around the time of this tour, then the Rocafella roster of people who actually ended up dropping an album on Rocafella, keyword, actually ended up dropping an album, would have been Jay-Z, Big L, Memphis Bleek, Beanie Sigel, and Emil. And I think, of course, DJ Clue. Of course, you had people like Rel, Alan Anthony, The Rangers, who in their case was kind of under the Rocafella umbrella, but they all never officially released an album under Rocafella. The people I just mentioned, and not Beanie and them. I think as far as 1999, in my opinion, nothing really album-wise would have changed. Memphis Bleek, in my opinion, would have still dropped his debut album, Coming of Age, which I think may have had a Big L verse on there, or two maybe. Then to close out the year, I think that Big L would have appeared on Jay-Z's album, Volume 3, Life and Times of S. Carter. At the top of 2000, I still believe that Beanie's debut album, The Truth, would have released, and I definitely think that Big L would have probably appeared on this album as well. Something to note is that in real life, Big L's sophomore album, The Big Picture, was posthumously released in August of 2000. I actually believe that if Big L did sign to Rocafella, then he would have ended up releasing around this time. The album was actually supposed to come out sometime in 1999, but I think with the change of scenery and now being on Rocafella, I think it would have gotten pushed to 2000, depending on when he signed, and which we don't completely know when he would have signed since he passed away, but I believe him dropping an album in 2000 is a safe answer. Now I do think this album would have done well under the Rocafella machine because besides Jay-Z, Bleek's first album ended up peaking at number 7 on the Billboard 200 and is now gold. And Beanie's debut album peaked at number 5 on the Billboard 200 and is now gold. I do think that this sophomore album would have taken Big L to the next level, especially with him being in a better position and with people who understands him more and his music. I don't think that Big L's sophomore album really would have affected Emil's album in any way. I don't think that it would have affected when it came out. I still think that what happened with Emil still would have probably happened. So yeah, I'm gonna just leave it at that. Big L definitely would have made an appearance on the Dynasty Roc-La Familia album because that originally was supposed to be a Roc-A-Fella Records compilation album, but after the records Guilty Until Proven Innocent and I Just Wanna Love You, Give It To Me were recorded, it was decided that it would be a Jay-Z album. Def Jam Records also didn't want to release it as a compilation because they felt like it would be hard to find in the record stores if it wasn't under Jay-Z's name. Now before I get into 2001, I want to talk about something I thought about while writing this. Now if Big L did sign a Rocafella and he did end up bringing people with him like Irv McGruff and C-Town, then I was thinking of the question of would that have affected state property? Let me know in the comment section below. Big L did want his own thing with Flamboyant Records, so maybe they could have been a branch, kind of like state property, how they were, and the whole Dipset Diplomat Records, how that ended up becoming a thing. Mind you, this is the perspective from the year 2000, so people like Cam and PD Crack weren't on Rocafella at the time. But as we can see with state property, they had the clothing line, it had movies, and it makes me wonder if Big L would have got the same if which I think that he definitely would have, but I can't give you a clear time frame onto when that could have happened. But before his death, he did talk about how he wanted to have flamboyant wear and Flamboyant Records, so he was definitely eyeing that kind of stuff. But I just don't know when and where in the timeline it would have happened. But another thing I believe is that Big L under Rocafella would have probably dropped another album in 2001 because there was a pattern. Bleek released an album in 1999 and at the end of 2000. Beanie Sigel released an album in 2000 and in 2001, and Jay-Z released an album in 1999, 2000, 2001, etc. I still think that it would have followed the order of Bleak, Beanie, and then Big L, which would make sense because I didn't mess with the order earlier. I think the album would have came out sometime between June and September of 2001 because that would be in between Beanie's album The Solution and Jay-Z's album The Blueprint. I have strong reason to believe that this album would have did well also because I mean earlier in the year of 2001, DJ Clue released The Professional 2 and that went on to go gold while peaking at number 3 on the Billboard 200. I definitely think that Big L would have made a few appearances on that. But there's two other main events that happened in 2001 that would have affected Big L if he was on Roc-A-Fella. The first thing is that Nas and Jay were beefing heavy, especially in 2001. We saw Memphis Bleak, Jay, and the members of State Property. They were all going at Nas out of their loyalty to Jay-Z. This may have put Big L in a tough place because of the mutual respect he had for both Nas and Jay-Z. But at the same time, Nas ended up dissing Camron, who actually ended up signing to Roc-A-Fella in late 2001. More on that later, but if Nas does still diss Camron, I don't know like if like Big L would have like went at Nas and stuff like that. I'm not very sure on that. But like now that Nas Camron situation, that really started in 2002 when Nas said that he was a fan of Cam but called his Come Home With Me album whack. Let me know if you think that Big L would have went at Nas due to Roc-A-Fella being against Nas and Nas even going at his man's which is Camron. It's definitely something interesting to think about and something that we don't completely know. Maybe if he was alive, some of these things wouldn't have happened completely or not happened how they happened. We don't know. There was also the thing with the locks, but I don't feel like getting into that. But back to Camron, and yes, I think Cam would have still signed to Roc-A-Fella in late 2001. The whole reason why Cam came to Roc-A-Fella in real time was that after his album SDE, which was released in September of 2000, Camron started to learn and understand the music business more, and he had someone inside the business telling him what Epic Records wasn't doing for him and what they should have been doing for him. Cam called upon his friend Dame Dash to help him get out of his deal, and they worked everything out. Cam was in a similar situation Big L had with Columbia, but the difference was that Cam was with Epic Records and had at least one gold album. And upon signing to Roc-A-Fella, Cam had this to say. Basically, Dame Dash has been managing me for the past year and a half, 2 years, and we just couldn't get it popping at Sony. We've been vibing together, good on the management tip, and we thought if we got it together on the label tip, we could get it popping. I bring a different essence to Roc-A-Fella. You got Philly MCs, Brooklyn MCs, they got some R&B, but they ain't got no Harlem flavor. Well, with the inclusion of Big L, there would be some Harlem flavor in the building, and I do think that this would have been more incentive for Camron to sign with Roc-A-Fella, even though he didn't really need it, like any more incentive. But Cam felt like with Roc-A-Fella, he was in a better situation because at Epic, he wasn't trying to listen to, in his words, dudes talking about hip hop while wearing khakis and moccasins. Like, he said people on Roc-A-Fella knew what hip hop was. Now, another thing to think about that's interesting is that Dame Dash has said that he believes Big L would have became a diplomat. Now, I'm not entirely sure because Big L had his own thing and Cam had his own thing, but under the same banner, I have no clue what would have happened. But here's the quote from Dame Dash. I was like, yo, you want to come with us? You could come with us. Just like I did with Cam. Just like I did for anyone else that was from Harlem that I had a rapport with. It's not even a question. I was always ready to pull that trigger for him at any time. All my plans, he was damn near included when he was ready. It was the same with the diplomats. No matter what, we always together. It would have been ill because Big L would have been a diplomat as well. He didn't even see that come to be realized. Definitely something to think about if Big L would have been a diplomat or a part of any other group involving Camron, especially while being on Roc-A-Fella. Cam was moving really fast on Roc-A-Fella, like I have said in numerous videos, because he signed in late 2001, and by the spring of 2002, Cam dropped his album Come Home With Me, which peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 200 with first week sales of 226,000 copies, and this album went on to go platinum. I definitely think Big L would have appeared on this album. Going back a little bit, in the State Property movie was released, and I do think that Big L would have made an appearance in this. This movie would have started production around the time Big L hypothetically signed, and if you've seen the movie, pretty much everybody on the label was in the movie. But there would be another movie that Rocafella was involved with that came out in 2002 that I know Big L would have definitely been a part of, and that movie is Paid in Full. A movie about Harlem and Big L not being in it, I mean, come on. Like, I think that it definitely would have happened. I don't know what role Big L would have played in the movie. I mean, like, we saw Camron be Alpo, but let me know what role Big L would have played. If Big L was going to have a third album on Roc-A-Fella, it probably would have been somewhere between 2002 and 2003. 2002 was a really big year for Roc-A-Fella with a lot of releases, 2 movies, 2 soundtracks, 3 albums. I do think this third album would have ended up being Big L's last album on Roc-A-Fella, and I'm about to explain why I think that in a second. But I do think that Big L's third album on the Roc wouldn't have been as successful as his first 2 albums on Roc-A-Fella. Think of it like Camron's situation. His first album on Roc-A-Fella did very well, but Cam didn't like how his second album on the Roc, Purple Haze, was promoted and it shows. It ended up peaking at number 20 on the Billboard 200 when a few years earlier he peaked at number 2. Cam was still hot in 2004, so it wasn't like he was cooling down, and we would see this with the album he released after Roc-A-Fella because Killer Season went back to number 2. Something was definitely up, and I do know Purple Haze was delayed and stuff like that, but we're not going to get into all of that. But I think something similar would have happened to Big L regarding the commercial success of his album, because either way, Purple Haze by Cam is still a classic and went on to go gold, and it's still highly regarded. But anyways, 2003 would pretty much be the beginning of the end for Roc-A-Fella. There was starting to be an obvious split with the heads of Rocafella at this point, and Jay was supposed to quote-unquote retire with the Black Album, which released in November of 2003. 2003 would end up being the calm before the storm, because in 2004, Rocafella would officially split. In 2004, Jay-Z, Dame, and Biggs sold their remaining 50% stake of Roc-A-Fella Records to his parent label, Island Def Jam. Jay was also named president and CEO of Def Jam Records. When Jay split from Dame and Biggs, basically the roster of people that were signed to Roc-A-Fella had to make a choice. Do you want to go with Dame and Biggs or go with Jay-Z? I've talked about this many times, and even in the latest State Property video if you want to know more about it. It's been said that they literally ripped a piece of a sheet in half, and one sheet went with Jay and the other one went with Dame. Then there's the story of just people choosing who they wanted to go with. I'm not here to argue which one I believe is true, but in this scenario, I do think Big L would have did something similar to what Camron did. Cam ended up siding with Dame, but Cam ended up getting a deal and doing his thing with the Silent Records. I think Big L would have did something similar in this instance, and we would see him take Flamboyant Records and do his own thing. As far as life after Roc-A-Fella, I think that Big L would have continued on with Flamboyant Records while taking it elsewhere. There's just so many what ifs in this story, and none of this is really for sure. A lot of this is just my opinion with the information I've researched and what I think would have happened. Big L could have dropped one album on the Roc and won it out, which could have led to this what if video not even being a thing, you know what I mean? So I'm like, you never know. I just love the concept and thinking what if something happened and the possible scenarios that come with that. Alright, I'm about to wrap up the video, but before I do that, I want to share some stuff that my supporters have sent me to say in this video. The first comment is from the homie Mounty, and shout out to them for showing me some love. But they think that if Big L signed to Roc-A-Fella, then him and Jay would have had a serious beef. I don't think that this part is a stretch, honestly, because it's definitely possible. They think that the Diplomats wouldn't have been what they are, but they could have been great on Bad Boy. This is not my opinion, I'm just reading what they said, so don't kill me, but tell me what you think. Gray88 said that Big L would have had a Redman type career, which is interesting to me and something that I can definitely see. They don't think that he would have reached the level of Nas, Jay, DMX, Big, etc. with popular crossover songs and multi-platinum albums. In an alternate reality, Dre and Jimmy Iovine scoop up Big L instead of Eminem, and then the what ifs get interesting. Wow, that is interesting. But M thinks that Big L could have been a good fit for the Rough Riders. Interesting thing to think of. Affirmative Records is another person who thinks that Big L would have had a Redman type career because he would have had a few hits and still had a cult following. Probably would have had a lot of crossover success like Jay and Nas, but still would have made an impact in hip hop. Like Redman, he continued to be your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. These were all pretty interesting to think about and some good theories. I really like this video concept and I'm looking forward to doing it in the future. All in all, let me know what you guys thought of the video. Should I continue this series of what ifs? And definitely let me know of future potential video ideas. I love you guys with all my heart. Peace.